What is it with liberal, even non-Christian liberals, lecturing Christians about what they believe? Yeah, I think you've got an example.
Yes, I've read this article just this morning by Tim Stanley of the Daily Telegraph, and he's talking about the church having opened its Lambeth Conference, and it ends today apparently. Intending to discuss the good news, it wound up arguing about gay sex, giving the impression yet again that it is self-absorbed and divided. This is Tim Stanley writing. Justin Welby, who after 9 years in the job now looks older than Methuselah, well, I would think that was a hate comment, wouldn't you? Declared a compromise. Doctrinally, homosexual acts remain a sin, but churches who move away from this teaching will not face sanction. And Sandi Toksvig wrote to the Archbishop in a public letter.
Sandi Toksvig is sort of like a TV presenter and producer, yeah.
Very humorous.
Liberal lesbian, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
She wrote in a public letter, and Tim Stanley says, does no one write privately anymore? Were they friends? She would tell him he had betrayed LGBTQ plus people. Condemning his statement of exclusion, she tore into fallible, outdated and bigoted interpretations of the Bible that misrepresent the true teachings of Jesus Christ. Namely, that all that matters is to be a good person. And then comes the kicker. I am a humanist.
Yes.
And Tim goes on to say, I've received many such communications down the years explaining why I'm wrong about this aspect of theology, or maybe another, and in my experience inevitably include a throwaway admission that the author does not themselves believe in God, which leads me to ask why they care that I do, or why it matters to them that a church keeps pace with the views of an atheist. This is like someone writing to Crufts to say, Dear Sir, when I attend your dog show, I was disappointed to see that it included no cats, and given that I cannot stand dogs and much prefer cats, I suggest you make amends, or I shall not return.
Yes. I think that's a good point. Why are they doing this? Why are they criticising the church, which has no power over them? They can't compel them to do anything.
You can't even compel them to become Christians.
No one can do that. So you have this ridiculous notion that Jesus just told you to be a good person. He railed against that. People putting rules and expectations. No, don't do that. That's not what it's about. And he said, people who were saying that they were putting burdens on people's backs that they weren't prepared to carry themselves. He was not saying that at all. You can summarise the good news of Jesus Christ's arrival. In summary, he arrives on the scene as God in human form and says, I've arrived to sort everything out. And he affirms the moral teachings of the Old Testament, certainly. And I say just the moral teachings because in terms of worship was then to centre around him. He should be worshipped because his God arrived on the scene. So there was a big change there. But in terms of the moral teaching, yep, absolutely affirms them. There were some examples given to show that he was very hardline on issues like, for example, divorce. And he was saying, judgment has come. I've come with a winnowing fork to make the chaff be blown away. So very strict there. And he's come and he's made his judgment. And his judgment is that if you come to him, you will be forgiven and made good by his Spirit.
You can't make yourself good.
So there's the two sides. One, you are bad. You deserve to be punished. Therefore, I'm going to make you good, such that you won't be punished. That's it. That is the Christian message. That's what Jesus' message is. It's not compromising on ethical standards at all. And so homosexuality, we can be confident that Jesus thought homosexuality in all its expressions was wrong. And in fact, any sex outside of marriage was wrong. And that apart from in special circumstances, someone being abusive, etc., being unfaithful to their marriage vows is what he's talking about, then divorce is also wrong. And so he was uncompromising. And the disciples said of the teaching about divorce, this is a hard teaching.
Who can bear it?
Yes, these were men suddenly realising, we have to actually respect our wives. That's my interpretation of it. But
yes.
They were all men he was speaking to who responded like that.
So can Jesus make you good against your will?
No, this is my belief. He can't, and that's the whole point. You can go against God's will in a heartbeat. You have freedom, but he calls you to obedience, because in the end that will result in bad things happening. Sometimes straight away. I suppose we can give this example. Here's a contemporary example. At the moment, there's outbreaks of monkeypox in different parts of the world. Monkeypox is always spread by skin-on-skin contact. And there's been outbreaks in America in particular, and the reports from there shows over 95% of cases were spread by homosexual sex with random people, either homosexual orgy or simply one of many serial partners. And so you could say that, well, that most people, even if they're supporting homosexuality, don't actually think orgies and promiscuity are great, and yet that is being punished. How is it being punished? By the natural outworking of what you do. If you behave like that, naturally this happens to you. And so as God has created the whole universe, he knows what things are bad for you and for everyone else. So homosexuality, partly for that reason that I've just said, that it spreads disease, is bad. And Jesus said it wasn't. So I just don't think it's... I can't see the truth in the statement. It's as though someone who never read the Bible is making a pronouncement on what Jesus said. That's what it feels to me.
Yes. And of course it says in the Bible, the truth shall...
Yes, it does say that, yes.
...set you free.
But before that, it says, if you obey my commandments...
Yes.
And then it follows, you will know the truth, and the truth shall make you free or set you free. So the truth will set you free, but the truth is that God's commandments are the right way to live. So in the Bible, it's clear, not just that any disembodied truth, anything that's true will set you free. Certain things are true and don't set you free. But the truth sets you free is a phrase that people use, meaning it's important to get to the truth. Well, I think that's true, but that isn't what the phrase means there in the Bible. It means... if you obey my commandments, because that's good, you will then know the truth, you will know the reality, you will know God because you're obeying him. And therefore you will be set free from being trapped into sin.
In a way, it's like your will being set free, not to be governed by yourself, but to be governed by God.
Yes, it's a bit like, say, for example, a child who is misbehaving. I just came from helping in a holiday club with kids. And
yes.
There were certain children who were misbehaving. Now, because they're misbehaving, this particular child, the issue was resolved. But what can happen is this. A child is misbehaving. It can't stop from, whatever it might be, maybe hitting people. They can't stop hitting people. They just can't control themselves. There's a rule you're not allowed to hit people, because otherwise other people won't want to play with you. So we got a rule. If the child learns to obey this commandment, not hit other people, he's going to have a great time because other kids will play with him. And then if we know that he's obeying the rules, he's got freedom to just play with all the children. And in fact to play with the toys, because he's not going to hit people if they try and take them off him. So he's got toys and to have a snack. All this opens up to him because he obeys the commandment. And then he sees the truth that that's the way to live. So he's set free. But he has to not hit people.
Yeah.
With homosexuality, you have to not engage in homosexual acts at all, but then you're set free to live a good life without doing that. Because God loves homosexuals, that's why he tells them not to do it. I don't see an issue with that. Norman, what do you think of it?
There are very few sermons that I actually remember, but I do remember a Baptist pastor at Spring Harvest quite a long time ago, and he went through the 10 Commandments one by one.
Yeah.
But he put it, I am a loving father, and I am saying to you, I would rather that you did not do, because it is not very good for you. And he went through each of the commandments in that type of way.
Yeah.
And they make an immense amount of sense, which is exactly what you're saying. And yet we as individuals, if we see a rule, we have this sort of mentality that says, oh, I'm bigger than this, I want to get round it, and I want to disobey. It's quite right that if that child that you were talking about understands the rules and obeys the rules, and they could be very, very simple rules, then they will enjoy the advantages of being there and all the good things around about.
Yeah.
And Beryl and I have exercised that in kids' clubs down through the years, and it works. Just quietly say to a child, look, we have this rule. You obey this rule and we'll have lots of fun together. If you stick to disobeying this rule, then you won't enjoy yourself very much. And actually, neither will I. Going back to the Sandi Toksvig thing, it just reinforces my feeling that people have a quiet, repressed fear of God that they're just trying to stamp out, but they just can't manage to stamp it out because God's designed us that way. So psychologically, you can understand people like Sandi and what she's saying and expressing that psychological fear and try to work out a way of countering it and reassuring and so on. And of course the other way is a very Christian way of looking at it, as saying there's good and evil in the world and there is the influence of Satan, and Satan gets into people even though people don't necessarily admit it. That is what influences them down the wrong line. But it's not very popular to say that to people. It doesn't really go down very well. So reassuring them down the psychological line. God's a loving God. God cares. You can feel comfortable with God is quite a good thing.
Yeah.
I've got a statement I'd like to make to perhaps finish up this segment.
Yep.
Many liberals, however, see diversity not as an end in itself, but a method, a means of compelling churches to shed old ideas and embrace modernity, so that the rainbow flag can someday fly from every spire or minaret in Britain. A diverse world
Minaret, I don't think
in
so.
which everyone thinks exactly the same.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's a good point at the end, yes. Yeah, that diversity in everything except you've got to do what we say.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. I forget which preacher, maybe I remember this, Beryl. There was a preacher who used to say, God is God and you are not, and he's quite happy with that. I can't remember.
No, I don't know, I'm
He would
afraid.
then go on to say, he's happy being God. So, for example, you can rail all you like. We're going to have diversity, we're going to have this, and go, God thinks you. Okay. I'm quite happy with it. I'm thinking, thank you. I'm God, and you're not. And what you're saying is going to end in disaster. I'm going to carry on with doing what I do. And I think we should do the same thing. People's claims about being offended is a choice. You choose to be offended. I think what we experience in the churches over the years, decades certainly, is a lot of mockery. Christian beliefs are mocked with some sort of attempt at humour. Let me give you one example. Just belief in God. I don't believe in God. I mean, you don't believe in Zeus or Thor or Loki or any of these gods. You don't believe they're real. So all I'm saying is believe in one less God. Right, that's what they say. Which is such a ridiculous thing, because you could equally say, well, all I'm saying is believe in one more God. Just a stupid non-argument. And have used that in debate, preempted it and said, so I'm not saying believe in all the gods. Just one more God. It's just a small change. This idea of mockery and ridicule, it's a method of rhetoric, isn't it? It's a way of arguing.
Yes.
And it's very useful and certainly quite legitimate. Jesus and Apostle Paul used it, and it's recorded in the Bible. Jesus comparing some of his interlocutors to whitewashed tombs. They look very nice on the outside, but they're filthy inside and need a good sweeping out. That's really what Jesus was saying. What did he say? Full of bones and impurity, I think is what he said. These are techniques that are used against us, and I don't believe it's being nice and kind to not use all these techniques at your disposal. I think we all should be able to mock and laugh at, ridicule these woke beliefs. As I say, they're not always atheists. Often they're people who just either don't think about God or they want to redefine who God is. But we believe in the true God and know the truth. I think we should use a bit of mockery. What do you think, Norman?
I love a little bit of mockery. I love a little bit of humour. I've got a number of speech inserts that I play on Flame. And one of them, I don't know if you remember, the Smash Aliens.
Yes, for MASH get smash.
Yes, that's right. Well, the aliens were approaching Earth.
Apart from these potato things, what other amusing facts did you learn about the inhabitants of planet Earth? Most earthling dwelling places have a book called a Bible. It tells them about their maker and about a visit he made to their planet 2,000 years ago. How often do they read this book? Most of them never even open it. Although it's about their maker, they never ever read it. So how do they find out about him? they don't. Most of those whose minds we read never gave a thought to their maker. And what does their maker think of that? I don't know, but I wouldn't like to be in their earth shoes when he pays them his next visit.
What? God's written a handbook specially for them, and they disobey the handbook? They must be stupid. Oh, what do they do then? Oh, they sit around in conferences. There are a lot of old men, and they dress up in fancy hats and robes, and they talk about sex. And they spend all their time talking about sex. Oh, how boring, the aliens said. Shall we go and find another planet?
Yeah. That means that the Lambeth Conference has saved us from alien invasion. So well done, Justin Welby. We take it all back, the criticism we were making earlier. A lot of sort of gentle jokes that are used in sermons making fun of atheist beliefs. There's jokes about the bear who's chasing down an atheist professor who's hiking through the woods. He was on his summer vacation, he was hiking through the woods in America, and a bear starts to chase him down. And suddenly, like all atheists at that point, when his life is in danger, he suddenly decides to talk to God. And he calls out to God and says, God, save me. If there's anyone up there, save me. And God decides to intervene, and time is frozen. The bear is stuck in position, except for the atheist professor, so to speak. And a voice comes from heaven, and it says, what would you like me to do for you? And he says, I've been attacked by this bear. He said, well, you haven't believed in me all these years. Why should I help you now? He said, well, I'll do anything. I'll do anything if you'll just help me. And then the voice from heaven says, I created the bear. It's just doing what comes naturally to it. You said in all your lectures that was the basis for morality. We should do what feels good. It's what the bear naturally does. He said, no, please. He said, okay, right. If you can't do that, if you can't change... Well, I know that Christians always behave better than other people. I've recognised that, I've seen that. So could you make the bear into a Christian so that he won't attack me? And the God ponders for a moment and says, it is done. And the scene, everything starts again. And the bear starts to come towards him. But at the last minute, before the cowering, fearful professor succumbs to the jaws of the predator, the bear suddenly kneels down and starts to pray and says, Lord, for what I'm about to receive, may we be truly thankful. And so that's that's a sort of a gentle joke poking fun of atheists who claim you should behave in a certain way, but turn to God in times of need.
I sometimes ask myself, why can't Christians be more humorous?
I told some rather mocking jokes about liberal theology. Liberal theology is really atheist infiltration of Christian thought, as we were talking about earlier. Well, and there's a member of the congregation, it was very offensive. Why are you talking about me? It was very funny. It was all focused on them because they believe that nonsense. And, well, maybe you should change your beliefs. People can be reached through mockery. But also, one thing that mockery does is it supports the beliefs of Christians, because you're attacking their intellectual enemy. You attack those ideas and ridicule them. It helps people in their own belief by pointing out the flaws, particularly as all the propaganda in the media tends to be the other way, anti-Christian. Yes. Let's use it the other way. Let's be more mocking. Let's make fun of people for believing stupid things. It gets easier and easier with the wokeism being the predominant atheist or agnostic religion, because they believe stupid things. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Beryl, about the two sort of sexual things they believe, which are both the opposite of the truth. So your sex or gender tend to be completely changeable according to woke belief, but it's actually fixed. You can do either male or female, that's it. For the rest of your life, you can't change it. But someone's sexual orientation, which is really a choice that you make, it's changes throughout people's lives, people are attracted to different people and things. That, of course, is totally fixed and probably has a genetic component. What? The opposite of the truth. So your sex, that can be changed. Actually, it's fixed. Your sexual orientation, which you could change at a whim, is the opposite. That's the one that can't be changed. Ridiculous nonsense. Up is down, black is white. No, we can't say that, can we? Black is white, because that would be sexist. Or is it racist? I'm not sure. I'm never sure these days. Yeah, the earth is flat. What? That's an interesting belief, isn't it? I used to think that flat earthers were all mad. But actually, some people who believe in the flat earth have their reasons. By the way, I believe firmly that the earth is a globe, and I think it was showed convincingly by a mathematical proof using the angle of light from different stars by Ptolemy in the 5th century BC, who worked out a vague calculation of the circumference as well. And he wasn't that far out. The flat earthers generally have a commitment to a certain form of knowledge, their epistemological beliefs. The thing about knowledge is this: unless you've experienced it yourself, you don't know it. And by common observation, we can see that the world is flat. All other claims are not from my personal knowledge, therefore it's not true. It's just a way of looking at the world. There's something in it. I think that they're wrong. I think that there's another level of sure belief. It's unpopular with philosophers. A philosopher who I think is Descartes.
Yes.
René Descartes. Now, his philosophical treatise on the existence of God starts with how you know anything.
Wasn't his famous saying, I exist, therefore I am?
Well, it goes even further. The I am bit means I exist. But yes, it is that. He uses a technique called extreme skepticism. So you rule out anything that you cannot know, that you can't absolutely know. So you're skeptical about all knowledge. But in thinking that, you are thinking.
Yes.
I think, therefore I am. That's how he starts. Mm-hmm. And he starts from, well, let's think about this. Oh, that is all I know. I know that I'm thinking. But that means there's an I because of the thinking I am thinking. And therefore from that, through a whole series of intellectual inferences, a series of, from that you can infer other, lead to the fact that God is real. And I think his way of describing it cuts away all this other nonsense. You can know that God exists because you can know that you exist. And from that infer other things that are true. There are many other ways of looking at it, but I think that's the most fundamental. Now, Descartes is ridiculed for supposed mistakes in his thinking, and I've tried to read this. To me, he makes more sense. So maybe there's something I'm not seeing, but I think you can see that the truth is that God exists. And anyone could see it. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. People are just trying to escape that fact, and that's where everything else, all these problems, it's believing stupid things, terrible. So we should mock it, because it's stupid.
Yeah, mockery is not in my nature, really. Why do we try to win battles? What's wrong with the diverse world in which we all think differently?
This is my answer to that. Let's see what you think about it. I don't think that it's good in and of itself to have diversity of opinion and thought, because some things are true. Yes, different tastes in music and people with different abilities and points of view on things that are subjective. That's, of course, good, because things would be boring without him. I don't think it's necessarily good that people have different views, for example, whether God exists. I don't think that that's a good in itself. However, I think people should be allowed to believe them. It's not good that that diversity exists, but given that there is that diversity of thought, we want to include all people should be able to hold those opinions and talk about it to each other.
I certainly think we should be able to talk about it with one
my
another.
long-term aim would be for everyone to believe the same. That God is real, he exists, he's the God of the Bible.
So this is just about God.
Other things that are true and important, I want people to believe the same, but I don't think it should be enforced. For example, I don't know, you should always look before crossing the road.
It's a good idea.
Not everyone's going to do it, but I think it would be better if everyone believed the same thing. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And I think we all know, if we have any common sense at all, that that's a good thing to do, that there must be some objective truth.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. There's some objective truth. And so I would like everyone to see it. But everyone should have their opinion on the truth. And in fact, that's how you arrive at the objective truth. By having it looked at from all different perspectives.
Yes. You
can see the ridiculous and stupid ideas, Justin, and we can see the different perspectives that are getting closer to the truth. There's a way of thinking of the world which, not quite the René Descartes utter skepticism one. It's a slightly different approach called critical realism. This is what I suppose people like N.T. Wright, who's a biblical scholar. He would approach the Bible from that way. How do you know what this Bible passage means? Another way of looking at it is iterative arrival at the real truth. So you say this might be true. You have a theory of what describes what it is. Maybe you have this animal and you want to say, is it a kangaroo? And you look at the, well, it's hopping around, it's got fur, the evidence is that it's a kangaroo. So let's go back and have another look, and you realise that it doesn't have a tail. I know kangaroos have tails, so we have to adjust our model. If it has a tail, it's a very tiny one. Perhaps it's a koala bear. Then you go back and look, well, what does it eat? You eventually arrive at the actual truth. But the one assumption you have is that there is an actual truth.
I think the British tend to use the duck as the animal.
Oh, it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck.
Exactly.
And it is a duck, yes. But it might be a swan. Who knows? Let's go back and have another look. Yes, Norman.
Is the Archbishop of Canterbury allowed to use his personal experience in the decisions that he makes?
Now, I was a bit sideways with that because I thought you were about to claim that he was a duck. Let me just state that I don't believe the Archbishop of Canterbury is a duck.
No, likewise.
Yeah, I think that's true because although he walks like a duck and talks like a duck, he isn't a duck genetically. So I don't think he should be making decisions for the Anglican Communion. Yes, he can use his personal knowledge to make arguments, but they jointly make decisions.
We all seem to think that we've got a saviour complex. We tend to think that we're the best thing since sliced bread, and we want to save the rest of the world in our way.
Are you suggesting that the Archbishop of Canterbury, in trying to sort all these things out, hold the Anglican Communion together, believes he's saving it?
Yes.
I agree with you. I hadn't quite looked to see it that way, but maybe that's his issue. And I think from the Archbishop of Canterbury, more is needed. The most important thing is not keeping together the Anglican Communion. The most important thing is standing up for the truth of the gospel and the way of life that God says. Even if he gets ridiculed and pilloried and loses his job and is hounded out of office and the Church of England implodes, if he just said, no, homosexuality is a sin, look here, it says it in the Bible, then he would have been doing something good and shown that he was a true Christian. But more than that, he would have been behaving with integrity in God's eyes. God's an audience of one. He's the only one that counts. And he hasn't done that through, I would say, cowardice.
I can't remember the question I asked to start this off, but yes, I agree with your answers, and I would feel it would be good if at some time, in some way, he did actually state the reality of...
It's making a judgment, but not being judgmental. For example,
there is a difference.
I'm not claiming that I would do differently with the amount of pressure on them. But I'm saying that if I did the same as them, I would also be wrong. Yes. I'm not making a claim that I'm better than them. What I'm making a claim is this is the right thing to do, to stand up for the truth of the gospel.